What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Super Mario Bros. Speeding towards $900 million, as our girl Nance over at Deadline is reporting this film just shy of $900 million. When it was going into the weekend, with the projections that we had, it was looking closer to getting around $850 million, and to no one's surprise, the film is continuing to exceed expectations, which is the reason why, at this point now, I think that my initial thoughts about Japan and South Korea are probably also going to be vastly, let's just say, outdone by the original $200 million that I said both would be putting towards the film combined. And I will say, hey, there's never been a film like Mario before. Clearly, I am willing to be wrong on this specific point, and so it's looking like that's probably going to happen, especially since no one is able to actually peg how much film this is going to make by the end of its run. Right now, if the numbers are going to hold like this, and if it's going to overperform based off of, again, there's no other film we can really historically compare Super Mario Bros. To in the markets like Japan or South Korea, more so Japan, I would say, because this is from Nintendo, a Japanese property and a Japanese company that is one of the co-producers on this movie. I think that we're ultimately going to see this film continue to overproject, meaning, hey, $1.5 billion or more is definitely now on the table for this movie. Again, my initial projections without Japan, without South Korea, had around $1.1 to $1.3 billion. I was willing to give a couple $100 million from those two countries, but again, I don't even trust myself really at this point anymore when it comes to this specific movie, because this film is not acting like pretty much any other film that we have ever seen. And to be fair, there's never really been a fair Nintendo film adaptation of one of their games, because we really definitely can't count the one from the 1990s, because that film was trash. But this film doing very well. Again, still not a huge fan of it personally, but hey, can't deny the numbers as they currently stand. As you can see right now, Deadline is reporting that it has an estimated $871.8 million, continuing to have insane drop-offs in every single market, meaning that it's having incredible holds between them. As it says right here, a 38% drop internationally, which is just downright insane. You go ahead and compare that to its domestic of 37%. Yeah, this film is just doing insanely well in so many different ways, in so many different categories. And hey, again, kudos to them for being able to pull this off. Very, very impressive, to say the very least. And we're starting to see these numbers actually be pretty much hand in hand with one another. I believe that it was Ryan from RK Outpost, shout out to him, he was saying on Friday Night Tights the other day that he thinks that this film's numbers are probably going to be having a much more typical domestic international split once you do have Japan and Korea start to come into the frame. And I think that's absolutely going to happen, because right now they've been pretty much neck and neck, which is already impressive, right? When a film like this comes out, normally you have a huge overprojection, or rather a huge overperformance in the international markets versus the domestic. In this case, you're actually having both perform very, very well. Then once you add in Japan and when you add in South Korea, again, assuming that it's going to exceed expectations, which at this point it's kind of impossible not to, I think that we're ultimately going to see that split widen, which is just nothing but help for this movie, because it's going to mean 1.3 to 1.6 billion might be the new range that I have to put for this movie. But we have to wait for that film to come out. It is coming out in those countries this week. So yeah, let's just say it's going to add even more money to the table. And it pretty much makes every other studio look terrible by comparison. Speaking of terrible studios, Warner Brothers came in at the number 2 spot this weekend with Evil Dead Rise. Apparently it's a sequel to the original Evil Dead, which is the reason why this film is much more focused on horror than on the comedy. Again, when I typically think of Evil Dead, though, I think of Evil Dead 2 and I think of Army of Darkness. And I love those movies. Those films are a lot of fun. I saw the trailer for this before the movie Nefarious, and I hated the trailer because I don't like movies like this. I don't like movies that try to go for those cheap scares of, oh, we can create this really creepy demonic imagery and scare you. No. I much prefer the psychological thriller, the ones that actually you have to think, the ones that you actually have to plan, the ones that you actually have to, write a decent script for. Films like Nefarious, I would actually say. In fact, I would say highly to everyone, go see Nefarious, because it's a film that's been pretty much blacklisted by most of Hollywood in the fact that it came out originally not having any competition. All of a sudden, 20 films, it seems, came to compete against it, amidst a plethora of other things, which I've talked about over at OMB Reviews. Coming in the number 3 spot is Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, a film I was able to see this past Thursday. Solid film, not my favorite Guy Ritchie film of the last few years, but still a solid film nonetheless. This film deals with the war in Afghanistan, specifically deals with how the relationship between the soldiers and also between the Afghan interpreters, and it's a very interesting, compelling story. I think very much supportive of troops, but also in a certain respect as well, showing the horrors of war, especially when you have, again, different political factions. It's a film about war that's not really all that political, and hey, I enjoy that. The ending, to me, I think, is just freaking awesome. And if you've seen the film, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The number 4 spot goes to John Wick Chapter 4, dropping another 29%, so still hanging around. Still not really doing the numbers that I thought this was going to do. Right now, $400 million is still a possibility worldwide, but it's looking less and less as the weeks go on, especially with Mario eating up all the competition. Air dropping to the number 5, or rather staying at the number 5 spot, dropping another 29%. However, because this film, one, cost as much as it did at $90 million, and the fact that Amazon spent $120 million, and that's not even counting marketing for the movie, yeah, this film is a giant flop for Amazon, is continuing to do so. I did want to also mention that Beau is Afraid is in the number 9 spot, adding 961 theaters. A24 continues to have these very weird releases, and also there was a new film from Fox Searchlight, or rather just Searchlight now, thanks Disney, Chevalier, which looks kind of interesting, but also looks kind of political. I don't know. It's hard to tell from the trailer alone, but $1.5 million, not really all that, again, impressive there. Nefarious, though, dropping to the number 12 spot, it seems, dropping only 53%. So for a second week, actually not terrible, especially when it lost 176 theaters versus at 757. Still doesn't have a great per theater ratio, but again, go see this film. I think it is well worth going to see. Let's go ahead and talk again about Mario, though. $876.4 million. As I was saying before, that domestic international split is so close, but once you have this weekend coming up, I think you're going to continue to see the domestic rise consistently. Again, this film is dropping 20-30%, like in the 20s and 30s every single week in pretty much every single market, and I think that we're going to continue to see that probably up until the beginning of May. So this film still has like a couple weeks left before it has any actual worldwide competition. And even then, I think the film is still going to do very well. I just would not be surprised if when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 comes out, it starts to get to the maybe 50s as far as its drops are concerned, just because that's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to it. But then again, hey, this is Mario, and it's not following any expectations or typical historical standards, so hey, you've heard that here first at this point. Evil Dead Rise, again, the image alone, I'm like, really? This is just, to me, just so stupid. Mommy loves you to death. Spare me. Anyway, $40.3 million actually might be one of the few films right now I can pretty much early on say, yeah, this film's likely going to make its money back, which is very rare for Warner Brothers. They're not used to those these days, so get ready for probably 1,000 more Evil Dead films, because that seems to be the only thing that they can make that actually makes any money. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, great film. Not doing all that well at the box office, though, with about a $55 million budget. Not a great start. I would definitely say to also go see this film. If I had to talk about the more recent films that came out, my two top picks would be Guy Ritchie's The Covenant and also the film Nefarious. If you could even see Nefarious, because, again, it's not available in most theaters. I wonder why. John Wick Chapter 4 at $358.6 million, according to the numbers. I know that sometimes their international numbers have been somewhat delayed, but I just don't expect the film necessarily to get close to, or as close to the $40 million mark as I had thought. But hey, you never know. It's still having some pretty strong holds. The film Air not really doing, again, percentage-wise having strong holds, but no one's really wanting to go see it. And it might even be a good film for all I know. I think I've heard some people say it was good, but hey, Amazon. Screw you. Dungeons & Dragons, $177 million, still not able to make its money back. The Pope's Exorcist, as I had predicted, this film has made its money back. No surprise there. Renfield, ooh, boy, yeah, this film is setting to be a box office flop. And then you have, of course, the updates for Beau is Afraid. Suzume, which is a fantastic anime film I'd also recommend. And unfortunately, Nefarious at $2.3 million. No budget projected for this movie, so I cannot say whether the film is a gain or not. Going to the box office charting, because we love charting here. As I mentioned, with Guy Ritchie's The Covenant costing as much as it did, right now it's around $78 million in the red. So yeah, definitely has a long way to go, and I hope that it gets an international release and it does well, but especially since this is dealing with Americans during the Afghanistan war, I just don't see that as being very compelling to non-American audiences. But I would say, again, if you want to see a film that deals with that war and deals with some of the things that most people can come to agreement on and say, yeah, that was really bad, and again, not really delve into the politics of it, I would definitely recommend it. It's also just another solid Guy Ritchie film. Evil Dead Rises is only $4 million in the red after opening weekend, which is why it's going to be able to hit. It's going to be able to get into the black by next weekend. Suzume, no budget, so I can't say how well that film is doing, but it's doing very, very well. Again, animes don't typically cost nearly as much as some of the other films that we've had on this list. The Pope's Exorcist, with the money coming in on its second week of release, we can now project the film will make somewhere between $74 and $104 million when all is said and done. With a very small $18 million budget, that means I'm projecting the film to make somewhere between $17 and $35 million in net gain profits. So not massive profits, but hey, enough to definitely be happy with. Renfield right now is $86 million in the red. I'm projecting that film to get to lose somewhere between $75 and $80 million. You then get to Super Mario Brothers movie and $375.8 million in net gain profit. This film is doing monstrous numbers at this point in time. So very, very impressive. Talked a little bit about Air. Again, $97 million in the red. Just nothing is going to happen there. Dungeons & Dragons, again, her was better than what it was, at least how people thought it was going to be, but not nearly enough. $100 million flop incoming there. John Wick Chapter 4 continuing to do well. $65 million in net gain profit is starting to fall into most the usual range. Anything that's bold or underlined means that it's outside of my projections and also outside of the typical range. And again, that updates every time the box office numbers get updated. And so as you can see, this one has now fallen into what will likely be, again, somewhere historically where I had these numbers listed. And then, of course, Shazam is essentially gone, and then Scream 6 essentially gone as well. But those are numbers as they stand. What else thoughts? Have you seen Guy Ritchie's The Covenant or Evil Dead Rise? Was either good? Again, I have no interest in Evil Dead Rise, but Guy Ritchie's Covenant, solid flick. I would definitely recommend it. And also Mafia Mama apparently also is still out in theaters, even though no one knew it came out last weekend. No one knew it came out this weekend, and there's no budget, so I can't say it's a flop or not, but most likely is. And then also, have you seen Super Mario Brothers film, and what do you think the final number is going to be? Right now, I think $1.3 to $1.6 billion if we do see those overperformances and those new historical standards being set, because really, I think this film is going to be the standard, right? This is going to be the film that any future Nintendo product, any future Nintendo Illumination product is going to have to compare itself to, right? And so, yeah, basically, you have a franchise setting opening here. Let's just hope that they can try to maybe tweak some things with those storytelling elements, because that's like the biggest flaw of the film. And I think most people who even love the film can admit that much. But hey, there's no denying the film is still a massive hit, massive success, and might even hit $1 billion before next weekend. Again, I think that it might have to wait until the weekend to hit $1 billion, but at this point, you never know. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, the fire button, honestly, special rumble button as well. Where it is that you're watching us, thank you very much for doing so, and continue to support us here at Geeks and Gamers. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.